Right. I would like to welcome everybody to Crop Around the World. I am Heather Wilson. I'm a community engagement specialist based in Michigan. And I wanted to share that you have raised over $6.3 million for Church World Service. And today, I am so happy to say I have two wonderful colleagues that will be sharing how those funds were were used. And please welcome Laura and Monica, and they're going to introduce themselves and they're going to tell their stories.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Curkendall, and welcome to Crop Around the World. Today, we'll be talking about the global impact that crop hunger walks had in 2021. During a year of uncertainty and rising challenges, your support was the toolbox that families used to tackle hunger, protect their health, and earn higher incomes. And we wanted to share some of those stories with you today.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Monica Arango, and we are happy to have you here. We want to share some of the stories of change from some of the people who participate in different CWS programs and the transformation that this brought to their lives.
A little bit about who we are before we get started. Like I said, my name is Laura Curkendall. I am the Senior Director of Integrated Communications here at CWS. I've been with CWS for about 9 years, and I live in the Pacific Northwest part of the United States near Seattle. And alongside my communications colleagues, I work with our programs around the world to tell the stories of the people who participate in them. And I'm very excited today that Monica is joining, who is one of my communications colleagues.
That's right. I'm the Communications and Advocacy Coordinator with CWS Latin America and the Caribbean team. I work with programs that you make possible across the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. And basically, we get photos, stories, videos, and reports of what we do with our local partners. Right now, I'm in Colombia, but I live in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And in fact, there I also support one of the CWS partners organizations, which is the Street Children's Project.
All right. Our plan for today is to take a trip around the world and introduce some of the people who you have reached in 2021. We've broken it up into 3 categories of impact. Part 1 is gardens and harvests. We will talk about how you help farmers improve their harvests and help families start or expand their gardens. Then we will talk about livelihoods and the ways that people have increased their income. Finally, we will touch on water, sanitation, hygiene, and actually education, the stories about schools, because the pandemic has certainly shown us all that protecting our health is critically important, and that's what you've helped families do this year.
Okay, the first set of stories that we wanted to share with you is about gardens and harvest. Countless families worldwide rely on their gardens or fields of crops to put food on the table. And your support means that our teams and partners can help farming families be even more successful. And sometimes that means trying new crops or farming methods to make land more productive in face of climate change. Other times it means planting crops with a short growth and harvest cycle to earn income quickly after a disaster. And here are some examples. Okay, our first story is about Maribel. She is one of the 292 families from the San Antonio community in Carazo, Nicaragua. She's participating in this holistic food security program. She joined activities and training sessions and then received fruit plants and seeds to expand her production and eventually improve her family's nutrition and food security. And diversity is a key component of this program. Families grow lots of different crops so that one bad harvest or failed planting season doesn't negatively impact their livelihoods. Plus, a diversified diet also leads to a better nutrition. In addition to crop diversification, Maribel and her family also focused on irrigation. As a result, they received a plastic water storage tank, which stands their growing season each year. And that means they are no longer limited to only the rainy season. Regarding this, Maribel told us, anything we harvest is welcome. This is our livelihood. So guaranteeing access to safe water, irrigation, sanitation, and hygiene is another of the strategies to strengthen food security in the area. This is especially important in places like her community, which has low levels of coverage in essential services. Maribel told us that her husband often is looking for jobs in construction to earn extra money for the family. Unfortunately, opportunities are rare and low paying, and both COVID-19 and hurricanes Eta and Iota in 2020 made their daily situation even worse. So this means that the skills that Maribel developed and the support her family has received have been crucial.
All right, and for our next story, I'd like you to meet Dominguez, who is from Indonesia. He lives in a small community in West Timor, Indonesia, that is part of our program that we call Timor Zero Hunger, which some of you might have heard of. Dominguez said that families in his community used to have small plots of land with very limited crops. Each family had about 2% of an acre that they grew their crops on, and the dry season was a huge problem in this community. Dominguez told us that he and his neighbors didn't have dry vegetables during the dry season, so their only planting season was between December and March. What vegetables they did harvest during that time, they would use to feed their families, and sometimes a family could harvest enough to sell some extras, but even then they only earned a few dollars each time, and so it wasn't enough. When they joined the CWS Timor Zero Hunger program, Dominguez and his neighbors got organized. He now leads a group of farmers who are leaning on each other in order to succeed. So they built a water tank and installed a pipe that is over half a mile long. It pipes water from a spring directly to their group's land. Remember when I said that they had about 2% of an acre usually as a family? So now the 16 families who before would have had about a third of an acre total are now farming a 2.5 acre plot of land. They attended CWS classes on drip irrigation and organic fertilizer, and they're putting what they learned to good use. They have a much more diverse set of crops that they grow now, and of course they have a much longer season for growing because of the irrigation system. They harvest 3 or 4 times a year instead of just once. And they feed their families with each harvest and take extra crops to markets where they earn 5 to 10 times as much as they did before for each harvest. And again, 3 to 4 times as many harvests. Dominguez called the program life-changing, and that's the impact of the steps that you're taking.
Okay, now for our next story, we go to Paraguay. She's Odilda. She lives in the Monte Alto community in Paraguay with her husband Norberto Ferreira and her 5 children. She's designated by the women of the community, and she is responsible for the garden in the village and coordinates tasks such as watering, transplanting seedlings, and harvesting. A total of 390 seedlings of the following species were purchased and planted: orange, grapefruit, mango, and lemon, and are completely adapted to the semi-arid environment with a 90% success rate with the appropriate care. In response to the interest expressed by the members of the community in having fruit trees as a resource of nutrients like vitamin C, CWS team gave them the seedlings to they could harvest. The distribution of the seedlings was between the families of the Espinillo and Monte Alto communities, which received 2 small trees that will provide fresh fruit to families for 3 years. Odilda has participated in training in vegetable gardens, agriculture, beekeeping, and human rights. And she's one of the 588 families, which is approximately 2,200 people participating in this program. The purpose of this 3-year program is to partner with 6 indigenous communities, 16 villages of the Paraguayan Chaco region of South America. The idea is to create durable improvements in the areas to access water, food security, community development, and organization. The program will provide culturally sensitive technical assistance in family and community, farming and livestock, community capacity building, and support indigenous advocacy. And of the program was difficult and challenging for indigenous communities and technical team because of COVID-19 pandemic, the restrictions, but this also encourages the team to be creative and adaptive to maintain frequent communication with the communities and finally to get the implement these activities.
Awesome. So we've talked so far about harvests and gardens, and then the next section that we wanted to talk about is income and livelihoods. When it comes to putting food on the table every day, income is one of the most important factors for a family. The more money a family earns, the more resources they have to buy food or supplies. They can purchase foods that they don't grow themselves. They can also buy household supplies or medicine. They can upgrade their house or their bathrooms. And when a disaster strikes, families who have more resources can recover faster and more easily. That's why we're going to share some stories now about how your support is helping families earn more money and have more diversified income streams. And we're going to start with Tamar's story from Georgia. Tamar's story certainly didn't start this year, but we did just check in with her in December, and she gave us a great update that we wanted to share. So Tamar and her family live in a rural part of the country of Georgia. They face many of the same challenges that other families around the world face. For example, the plot of land where they grow fruit and vegetables to sell didn't earn enough income for her whole family. There's an added challenge for families in Tamar's community too. It's called energy poverty. It means that electricity is incredibly expensive in the area where she lives. So in her community, women and children in particular spend time every day trying to find firewood or other fuel that they can burn to heat their homes and cook meals. Tamar told us that her knees and back often hurt from hauling so much wood all the time. And just as a side note, it is January, and I happened to check the weather for the capital of Georgia today, and I believe the high was 37 degrees Fahrenheit. So it does get very cold, and that firewood is important for keeping people and their homes warm. So several years ago, our partner RCDA, or Rural Community Development Association, teamed up with Tamar and her neighbors to try to help. Similar to Dominguez's story from Indonesia, this story is about getting organized and working together to earn an income. Tamar was one of the founders of a women's cooperative in the area. With your help, we helped them build a drying facility for their fruits and vegetables. They use renewable energy technologies, and so by using industrial strength solar fruit and vegetable dryers, they could sell dried fruit and vegetables for more money than they could earn by selling the raw produce. It worked, and the women started earning more money that they could use to buy food and meet other household needs. In 2019, the cooperative was able to add a cool storage facility, which is what you see Tamar standing in the photo. By storing produce until the off season and then drying it, their profits could go way up because they could sell when demand was higher. So when we checked in with Tamar earlier in last year, she told us that each of the women in the cooperative earned a couple $100 extra in 2020, which she said really helped during the lean times of the pandemic. But then when we talked to her in December, she said that now each woman is earning about $1,400 per year of additional income for their family that they can use to buy food, pay for electricity, find alternatives for addressing their energy poverty. And because we were talking to her in December, they told us about the Christmas gifts that they were planning to buy their family with the money that they had earned through their cooperative.
Okay, now I want you to know Esmeralda. She lives in Honduras. This is a beautiful story. Preparing chicken soup with basil, oregano, and green bananas, or the fried fish that her son and husband like, is now so much easier for this 27-year-old. She's Esmeralda Robles. Today, she uses lace firewood, cooks food faster and saves time preparing meals in her kitchen. Before, her house was covered in soot, a black, very fine and greasy substance that forms from smoke and sticks to surface. Before, she says, I had a permanent cook. Now, with just a lot of firewood, you cook, you don't need much, unlike the stove we had before, and it's very helpful for our lungs that there is no smoke. And this is one of the advantages of the eco stove that she and 58 other families have installed in their homes to prepare meals without increasing environmental pollution. The most important contribution of eco stoves, however, is the significant reduction in the use of firewood. This is one part of a CWS program to improve food security and adapt to climate change. Our local partner who developed the program is Mennonite Social Action Commission. This program is unfolding in Macuelizo, Nueva Frontera, and Azacualpa, all of which are in the department of Santa Barbara in Honduras. In total, 500 families from rural areas with limited economic resources participate in different parts of the program. Esmeralda lives in Vainillas in Macuelizo. The weather is warm, but the mornings are often chilly. In her community, there are about 50 houses located near a pine forest and large tamarind and mango trees. After traveling several highways and paths, you can see the greenhouse where Esmeralda lives with her husband Rigoberto and her son Diego. Esmeralda calls Vainillas, this place, a beautiful place with friendly people with good coexistence. We all know each other because we have always been there. I was born and raised here, she says. And through a past chain activity in the program, Esmeralda received several foster animals. This activity consists of a family receiving a pregnant pig, sheep, or cow and feeding and caring for it. When the next piglet, lamb, or calf is born, it is passed on to another family, which in turn will do the same. Today, Esmeralda has a pregnant sow, 3 sheep, and 30 chickens. Other CWS-supported initiatives in the community where Esmeralda lives include the installation of pipes for the drinking water, because previously families had limited access to water, and cultivating tilapia and raising cows, sheep, and chickens.
Great. So the final story in this section is from Cambodia. So this is Oi and his wife Kong, and families like theirs often earn an income as day laborers, which means that they work when they can on other people's lands, planting, harvesting, or doing whatever else needs to be done. Oi lost his leg in a landmine accident, which means that it's much harder for him to do this day laborer work. Kong earns about $5 per day on a nearby corn farm, but it's not stable or consistent work. Oi told us that they would often have to borrow rice or the money to buy rice, and then he would also find work as a day laborer specifically so he could repay his family's debts. At this point, there's something you should know about the programs that you make possible. Our programs rely heavily on listening to the people and the communities who are participating in them. Usually, if someone is facing huge challenges like food insecurity, they know how to address that challenge in the best way for themselves. What they usually don't have are the funds, tools, skills, or expertise that they need to accomplish it. So that's why so many of our programs focus on listening. This is one of them. In this case, CWS and our partners sat down with Oi and Kong to make a plan to address their food insecurity. Oi told us that a few years ago, he took a course about how to repair motors through another organization. Motorbikes are a very common means of transportation in many communities, including his, so knowing how to repair them could lead to a good career. Unfortunately, he never had the startup resources to actually launch the business. That is, until you stepped in to help. So CWS provided a startup grant of $350 so that Oi could buy spare parts and tools. Remember, they used to earn $5 per day, so let's say in a month, Kong worked 5 days a week, and that would be about $100 per month. Today, Oi is making $250 to $300 each month through his repair shop. Kong no longer has to sell her labor. They have plenty to eat. They've been able to start saving money, and Oi has plans to expand his shop. It has also been great for Oi's mental health, since he has a new sense of purpose and confidence. That's a family's life totally transformed, all from a grant of $350. Okay, I want to take this time to apologize. There's a truck right outside my window, and I apologize if the sound gets weird for a couple minutes, but I'm going to keep going. The last section of stories that we want to share today is about water, sanitation, hygiene, and education. So access to clean water is a critical part of food security because you need water to drink and to wash your food, your hands, and your cooking surfaces. Good hygiene practices, sanitary bathrooms, and clean water all also help families protect their health. This means less money spent on medicine and less time away from school or work. So I wanted to share one more story with you before we wrap up today, and it's about water, and it's actually about schools too, to show you the impact that you're having in this sector. So one of the program areas where we have a lot of water and sanitation programs is also our education programs. When a school doesn't have water or enough bathrooms, students have a lot more to worry about than what they're learning in their lessons. Imagine having one bathroom for 200 or even 300 students, or not having water at your school and having to walk to a river or other water source to get your water. Both of these things are distracting and they're unhealthy, and they would take up a lot of your mental energy if you were a student at this school. Not to mention, they would also consume any breaks you had during the day as you waited in a long line for a bathroom, found an alternative, or walked to get water. So our education program in rural Western Kenya has helped schools improve their infrastructure for years, and that includes bathrooms and water tanks. Big water tanks, not the ones you see in the photo. These are hand washing tanks. Our program also focuses on other infrastructure elements like dormitories for students who live far away, classroom supplies, and outreach to get parents invested in sending their children to school. One of the schools that we've worked with for years that I wanted to mention today is Gengetro Primary School in West Pokot County, Kenya. We helped the school build more bathrooms and install huge water tanks, plus a new dormitory for girls. This was a couple of years ago, and we recently talked to the deputy head teacher at Gengetro. She told us that something really cool that we hadn't heard yet, which is we built a girls' dormitory at the school a couple of years ago, which actually triggered the county government to match it with a boys' dormitory. So pretty soon, school enrollment had doubled because this huge hurdle was taken out of the path of so many students. The teacher credited CWS and our community outreach efforts for this. But now to talk about 2021. Unfortunately, Gengetro struggled in 2020 and 2021 because of the pandemic. Like countless schools and communities across the United States, including where you probably live, Gengetro was closed for a long time because of the pandemic. We talked to the deputy head teacher who told us about how her students lost nearly a year of education because of the pandemic. She just said that students in Nairobi or urban areas could use computers and the internet to keep up with lessons, but that wasn't the case in poor rural areas like the community around Gengetro. So when schools started to reopen, CWS helped the teachers here conduct catch-up learning sessions. We also provided materials and information for parents and families in the community about how to prevent the spread of COVID-19, and that's where the hand washing stations that you're seeing in the photos come into play. You have walked along Gengetro plenty of times in the past, making sure that they had what they need for their students, all of their students, including the girls who often have higher dropout rates than the boys. You've been there to make sure that all of the students have what they need to have a safe, dignified learning environment. And you're right there doing it again as they're coming out of this period of hurdle and finding their footing again for the future. And I want to thank you for that generosity. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we're going to come back on.
Thank you,
Whether you want to or not, Laura.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, please feel free to type those in, and we'll do a little Q&A here. And The first question is actually, it popped up, Monica, when you were talking, so I believe it's about the places that you were talking about. How has climate change affected the efforts to grow food?
Okay, one of the difficulties that our communities and local partners have are, for example, rainy seasons where they can harvest anything, but then comes the dry season. So it's like they are working on the streams. That doesn't have water, or they have a lot of water. So it's difficult to maintain a balance of harvest food in these conditions. And actually one of the support activities, creative activities that we implement with our local partners was systems of irrigation. So they can improve and manage to harvest their food and grow their food, even if it's a rainy season or a dry season, because it's one of the challenges nowadays with climate change.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I mean, Monica's absolutely right about the dry seasons and the droughts becoming more severe, but we're also hearing that they're becoming a lot less predictable too. So for communities that have been relying on farming for generations, the same rainy season or dry season might be shorter or longer or later or earlier. And so that makes it a lot harder for families who are trying to get their crops planted at the optimal time to time it correctly. Which is another challenge we've heard about and are working to address.
Laura, could you also speak to, and you did a little bit by saying that the pandemic closed the school for a year, delayed education as it has across the world here. Can you just speak a little bit more now that we're heading into the third year of this pandemic, that how it is affecting our programs?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the impact that the pandemic has had over the last couple of years has been similar to what we've experienced in the United States, but of course it plays out in different environments. But so early in the pandemic, we went through a lot of program adaptation, and there was a short period where, similar to everything in the US, everything kind of closed to reevaluate and figure out what we were going to do. And then the adaptation started, and programs took on new dimensions, or they adapted. So a lot of our programs, as I'm sure you're aware, and we talked about, rely on group classes and workshops. And so many of our programs adapted those to make them the same information, but they would go family to family to do it in much smaller groups, which has the upside in some cases where families got very customized information because it was happening in their front yard, talking specifically about, their crops or that kind of thing. A lot of our programs in 2020 added the distribution of hygiene and safety and food items to families. So if there was an economic shutdown, and oftentimes it was the most vulnerable who lost their livelihoods, especially in cities during that time. So we put together food boxes, or we distributed masks and hand washing supplies and soap and that kind of thing to prevent the spread of the disease. So that was another factor. I think as we've moved away from the early days of the pandemic into, I think, what we've all experienced of this new normal of how we live with it in the midterm, you see a lot more of the adaptations, like what I talked about at the beginning of programs doing smaller group work, certainly masking and distancing as much as we can in our programs, but trying to, and successfully doing, maintaining the work that we set out to do in this new environment with the precautions that we need to and the adaptations in place. But I think, yeah, I'll stop. But that, yeah, we've adapted them, but they're continuing.
You could keep going, Laura. We did have a question about, in the pictures, there were a lot, especially like when you get to our waters, a lot of big pieces of plastic do we educate on how to dispose of those, of recycling or any of the disposal of the big pieces of plastic that they use?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that I don't have an answer to offhand. So I'm happy to follow up on that question specifically. Yeah, it's a great question. I know that, you know, maintenance is usually built into our programs, and it's not about building a water system and then leaving. It's about building a water system that can be repaired and maintained and used for years or decades to come. I don't know the disposal component particularly, and I'm happy to follow up on that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We don't really have any more questions. So I will do a few little things here. There are links to every story that was talked about in the chat. The very first link is takes you to our stories of change, and we have many, many of them. We are wonderful at collecting the stories for you to share out, to show what all the good that the funds that you raise, what we do with them. We thank you for all you do, and I just want you to remember that this is recorded, and you will get the link, and you can share it out to anybody you think needs to know what Church World Service does. And Pearlie asked if we will do more of these. And yes, that's the plan. The plan is to do more of these little short, show you what we're doing, the good stewards we are with the money that you raise. And so look for these, and hopefully we'll get a couple more out to you this year. And I think that's it. And I would just like to thank Laura and Monica very much for doing this for us today. And here's to another great year of walking to end hunger. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. We love Crop Hunger Walkers.
We do love them, don't we? They're amazing.
They are.
Thank you, everybody.